Picture this, June 2nd, 1899. It's past midnight, somewhere in the wide-open Wyoming countryside. A steam locomotive is barreling down the tracks at full speed, its headlamp cutting through the pitch black. The engineer has no idea what's coming, and in the darkness, 6 masked riders are galloping hard across the prairie to intercept it. These aren't random bandits. They're the best at what they do. They ride alongside the train, plant the dynamite on the express car, and blow it wide open. They grab the cash, a substantial haul, and then, just like that, they scatter into the Wyoming night and vanish. The whole operation takes minutes. That wasn't a scene from Red Dead Redemption 2. That was the actual Wilcox train robbery, a real event that happened on June 2nd, 1899, pulled off by the most notorious outlaw gang in American history, Butch Cassidy's Wild Bunch. And Rockstar coded that event directly into the game. Same year, same Pinkerton agents hunting them down. Same desperate scramble as the entire American West was closing in on the last true outlaws. So the real question isn't, is Red Dead historically accurate? Because yes, in a lot of ways, it absolutely is. The real question is, how deep does the rabbit hole actually go? Because the answer is a lot deeper than most people realize, and some of it is genuinely dark, genuinely surprising, and in a few cases, genuinely unresolved to this very day. We're talking about stories that are still playing out in American courtrooms right now as you watch this. Before we get into the specifics, some essential context, because none of this makes sense without understanding exactly what era these games are depicting, and why that era was so extraordinary. Red Dead Redemption 2 is set in 1899. Red Dead Redemption 1 takes place in 1911. Together, these two games bracket what historians call the closing of the American frontier, the violent, chaotic, and deeply unequal death of the Old West. And it wasn't a slow fade, it was a collision. By the late 1890s, the railroads had completely crisscrossed the continent. The telegraph had been running for decades. Cities like New Orleans, which you'd instantly recognize as the game's Saint-Denis, were booming with industry, money, and profound inequality. The Gilded Age was in full swing, and for the outlaws, the wide, lawless spaces they'd relied on were shrinking fast. Their world was running out of room. And that's the genius of what Rockstar built. The Linde gang isn't just a fictional outlaw crew you happen to play as. They are a symbol of everything the Old West represented: freedom, violence, fierce loyalty, and ultimately, total obsolescence. People and a way of life that the modern world simply had no more room for. The game literally opens with them fleeing a heist gone wrong in a raging blizzard, hunted by Pinkerton agents with nowhere left to run. If that doesn't scream end of an era, nothing does. Before we go any further, I want you to drop a comment right now. Which part of Red Dead do you think is the most historically accurate? Whether you've played the game 100 times or you've never picked up a controller, I want to hear your take. I read every single comment. All right, let's get into it. Okay, let's talk about the outlaws. The primary real-world inspiration for the Linde gang is Butch Cassidy's Wild Bunch, widely considered the most successful train and bank robbery operation in American history. And the parallels are not subtle. Rockstar wasn't exactly hiding the ball here. Gang leader with a charismatic philosophy about fighting back against capitalism? Check. Pinkerton agents closing in from all sides? Check. The gang slowly fracturing under pressure as the options run out? Check, check, check. Butch Cassidy, real name Robert Leroy Parker, grew up in Utah and started out as an ordinary cowboy before discovering he had a knack for something more lucrative and considerably more illegal. He assembled the Wild Bunch through the mid-1890s, a loose but effective confederation of some of the West's most wanted men. Their most famous job? The Wilcox train robbery of June 2nd, 1899. They blew the express car with dynamite and escaped with a substantial haul. Sound familiar? Because Rockstar put almost exactly that event into the game's timeline, set in that same year. In the game, the Vanderlinde gang is being hunted relentlessly by Pinkerton detectives, agents Edgar Ross and Andrew Milton. And the Pinkerton National Detective Agency was absolutely real and was absolutely terrifying. Founded in 1850 by Scottish immigrant Alan Pinkerton, the agency grew into something genuinely extraordinary. By the 1890s, it's estimated the Pinkertons had more active operatives in the field than the entire U.S. Army. They weren't just detectives, they were America's first private intelligence agency, labor suppression force, and fugitive hunter, all rolled into one formidable and often brutal institution. Now, here's the key creative liberty Rockstar took. Dutch Vanderlinde becomes increasingly unhinged, paranoid, and murderous as the game progresses. He becomes genuinely dangerous to everyone around him, including his own people. The real Butch Cassidy? By most historical accounts, he reportedly never personally killed anyone during his entire outlaw career, not a single confirmed kill, until possibly the final Bolivian shootout in 1908. He was actually known for his humor and his reluctance to use violence when a clever solution existed. So Dutch's homicidal spiral? That's Rockstar's biggest creative departure from the real-life inspiration. Now, let's talk about the real people hiding in plain sight throughout both games. Because Rockstar didn't just draw on the broad historical era, they seeded the actual world of these games with characters directly based on specific, real historical figures and events. Some of them are obvious if you know your history. Some of them are so obscure that you'd only find them if you were writing a PhD dissertation on 19th century American crime. Let's go through a few of the best ones. First, remember that deeply unsettling pig farm mission early in RDR2? The creepy siblings who invite you in, drug your food, rob you, and bury you out back? That's not just dark game design. That is a near-direct lift from the Bloody Benders of Kansas, a real family who operated a roadside inn on the Osage Trail in the early 1870s. Travelers would stop for the night and disappear. When authorities finally investigated in 1873, they found the bodies of at least 8 people buried on the property, each with their skull caved in from behind. The Bender family vanished before they could be caught and were never officially brought to justice. Rockstar put that story in the game almost beat for beat. Early in RDR2, if you're paying attention, Arthur stumbles into a suffragette rally in Saint Denis, a group of women standing on street corners with protest signs, being openly mocked and harassed by men passing by. Historically, completely accurate. By 1899, the American suffragette movement had been fighting for the vote for more than 50 years. Women in most U.S. states wouldn't get the right to vote until 1920, more than 20 years after the events of RDR2. One of the protesters in the game appears visually inspired by Sophia Duleep Singh, a real South Asian British suffragette who was one of the most prominent activists in the Women's Social and Political Union. Rockstar put her in the background of a random street scene. That's the level of detail we're dealing with. Alright, now let's talk about Arthur Morgan, because his death from tuberculosis is one of the most emotionally devastating storylines in modern gaming history, and it is also, and this part might surprise you, genuinely, rigorously medically accurate. TB, known in the 19th century as consumption, was one of the leading causes of death in America throughout the 1800s and into the early 1900s. In the game, Arthur contracts it when a debtor he's roughing up coughs blood directly into his face during a close confrontation. That specific transmission mechanism, direct contact with infected respiratory fluid, is medically accurate to how tuberculosis spreads. Rockstar researched this properly. What's even more precise, the visual symptoms Rockstar depicted, the progressive weight loss, the pallor, the bloody coughs, the deepening fatigue, are all medically accurate representations of late-stage tuberculosis. And based on the game's pacing, Arthur deteriorates over approximately 6 to 8 months, which is consistent with documented historical cases of advanced TB in an era with zero effective treatments. The standard treatment at the time was rest in dry climates, which is why Arizona and Colorado were full of tuberculosis sanitariums. It saved almost nobody. Here's something most players just don't think about. The weapons in RDR2 are completely era-appropriate, and that matters because Hollywood has spent a century glamorizing the six-shooter as the iconic weapon of the Wild West. But in reality, revolvers had significant reliability issues, limited range, and a slow reload time. Most serious lawmen and outlaws of the era actually preferred the stopping power of a shotgun or the range and magazine capacity of a Winchester repeating rifle. The game reflects this accurately. You can find the Schofield Model 3 revolver, the Winchester Model 1894, and the Carcano rifle in the game, all weapons that were genuinely in active circulation in 1899. And then there is the wealth divide, which in the game is represented by Leviticus Cornwall, the cold, untouchable oil and railroad tycoon who deploys private armies to protect his interests and treats human beings as disposable costs of doing business. Here's the thing about Cornwall. He is not an exaggeration. He's actually an understatement. The 1890s were the absolute height of the Gilded Age. Rockefeller, Carnegie, J.P. Morgan. These men controlled wealth that, in inflation-adjusted terms, made today's billionaires look modest. There were no meaningful income taxes, no labor protections, no antitrust enforcement. Workers in mines and factories routinely worked 12 to 16-hour days for poverty wages with no legal recourse whatsoever. Cornwall isn't a cartoon villain. He's just a lightly fictionalized historical reality. Now we get to what I genuinely believe is the most historically significant thing Rockstar put in RDR2: the Wapiti Tribe storyline. A Native American reservation being systematically dismantled and destroyed by the combined forces of the U.S. government and industrial corporate interests, specifically because of oil discovered beneath the reservation land. This is not a generic, sad Indian trope. This is a specific, deliberate, historically informed narrative that draws on two of the darkest chapters in American history, and most players had no idea they were experiencing a retelling of real events. The primary inspiration is the Osage Indian Murders, one of the most horrific systematic crimes in American history. Oil was discovered beneath Osage Nation land in Oklahoma in the early 1900s. Rather than respect Osage land rights, a network of white settlers, businessmen, and corrupt officials orchestrated a systematic campaign of murder and legal fraud to steal the oil wealth, targeting the wealthiest Osage families one by one. The Bureau of Investigation, the direct precursor to the FBI, eventually intervened, but not before dozens of Osage people had been killed. David Grann's book, Killers of the Flower Moon, and Martin Scorsese's 2023 film brought this story to wide public awareness, but Rockstar was gesturing at it in 2018. And before the Osage case, there was the seizure of the Black Hills from the Lakota Sioux in the 1870s. Gold had been discovered in the Black Hills of South Dakota, land that had been explicitly and legally guaranteed to the Sioux Nation by the Treaty of Fort Laramie, signed by the U.S. government in 1868. Within just a few years, the government broke the treaty entirely, flooded the region with gold prospectors, and eventually sent in the U.S. Army to take the land by force. The legal case over that theft is, I want you to hear this, still being litigated in American courts today. Rockstar drew on both of these stories to construct the Wapiti Tribe narrative, and they did it with more care than most Hollywood productions ever have. Now, Red Dead Redemption 1, set in 1911, John Marston is forced by government agents to hunt down his former gang members, including Dutch, while operating along the US-Mexico border region. And here's something that genuinely surprises most people. The Mexican Revolution that forms the backdrop of Nuevo Paraíso in RDR1 was not a fictional conflict invented by Rockstar for the game. The Mexican Revolution actually began in 1910 and 1911. Francisco Madero's uprising against the 30-year dictatorship of Porfirio Diaz launched in late 1910 and resulted in Diaz's resignation and exile from the country in May of 1911, the exact same year the game takes place. Rockstar released RDR1 in 2010, which, as it happens, was the centennial anniversary of the Mexican Revolution. For Mexican players, the historical resonance was immediately striking, and Rockstar's developers have cited Mariano Azuela's 1915 novel Los de Abajo, which translates as The Underdogs, as a direct influence on the narrative structure of the Nuevo Paraíso storyline. Los de Abajo is widely considered the defining literary account of the Mexican Revolution, written by a doctor who served as a medical officer in Pancho Villa's army. It follows ordinary people swept up and ultimately destroyed by forces larger than themselves. Sound familiar? All right. Credit given where it's due. Now let's talk about where Rockstar got it wrong. Because to be fair, nothing is perfect, and intellectual honesty matters. First, the violence. The game makes Old West gunfights look like extended military operations. In reality, real gunfights in the Wild West were almost always short, chaotic, and involved very few people. The most famous gunfight in Western history, the OK Corral, Tombstone, Arizona, October 26, 1881, lasted approximately 30 seconds. 3 people were killed. 9 shots were fired in total. That's the legendary OK Corral. In RDR2, you can single-handedly fight off entire armies. Those two things are not the same. And then, Arthur Morgan, our beloved dying protagonist who, despite being in the late stages of active tuberculosis, is somehow able to sprint, fight, wrestle, ride hard, and take on entire outlaw gangs for months on end. Look, medically speaking, real advanced tuberculosis patients in 1899 were largely bedridden. Most would have been unable to work, let alone conduct armed sieges. But here's the thing, we can forgive Rockstar for this one. Because making your protagonist lie in bed coughing for 6 hours does not make for a commercially viable video game. Sometimes creative compromise is necessary. We'll let that one slide. Here's what I want you to take from all of this. There have been countless Western movies, TV shows, novels, and games. Most of them recycle the same comfortable myths. The romantic lone gunslinger, the heroic frontier, the simple moral universe of good guys and bad guys. And those myths are fun, but they're mostly fiction. What Rockstar did with Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2 is something genuinely rare in mainstream entertainment. They used the machinery of a 100-hour blockbuster video game to smuggle in real, complicated, uncomfortable history. The Osage oil murders, the Pinkerton Agency's role in crushing labor movements, the Suffragette movement, the systematic destruction of Native American land rights, all of it wrapped in a story compelling enough that millions of people actually cared. 8 years of development, multiple academic papers written specifically about its historical authenticity, a virtual world so meticulously detailed that you can find era-specific newspapers on street corners, witness real political movements being born, contract actual historically documented diseases, and watch the sunset over a landscape so convincingly rendered that it genuinely looks like a photograph taken in 1899. Is it a perfect history lesson? No. Is the violence exaggerated? Absolutely. But as a gateway, as an introduction to one of the most complex, tragic, and important periods in North American history, Red Dead Redemption might be the most effective popular history education tool of the 21st century so far. That's not a video game. That is a time machine. Here is the one takeaway I want you to walk away with. The most powerful history lessons are not always found in textbooks or classrooms or documentaries. Sometimes they are hiding inside a 100-hour open-world cowboy video game that you bought for $60 and played in your living room at 2 in the morning. Rockstar Games built something that will make people curious about Butch Cassidy, the Pinkerton Agency, the Osage Murders, the Mexican Revolution, and the women's suffrage movement for decades to come. That is a cultural legacy that goes way beyond entertainment. If you want to go deeper on any of this, start with David Grann's Killers of the Flower Moon. You will be genuinely stunned by how much of what you just thought was fiction was completely, historically real. Hit subscribe if you want more of this kind of deep dive. Drop your thoughts below, and I will see you in the next one.